right, hello again, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. We're live again today, and we're going to be talking about unemployment in Africa and the dilemma or the antithesis of exits of our specialized professionals to other countries of the world. If you're joining us today, I would like you to let us know where you're joining us from. And if you know someone who would be interested in this discussion, it's time to share it. It's time to invite them to this discussion. We're live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Facebook, and I'll just post our links right on this chat in a few seconds. So share it and let people join in this discussion. I'm going to just go right ahead and introduce our panelists for today's session. Thank you so much for joining. Okay, beautiful, beautiful. You see, we have a great lineup from all across Africa, all across the world. And I'm just going to let you see their faces this morning. Please say hello to the audience, starting from the ladies. I think I like Gathoni's smile. Gathoni, just say hello. Yvonne, just say hello to the audience. And as we're
Okay.
starting,
Thank you,
all
Kenneth,
right,
so much for having me. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
great. Yvonne,
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here on this panel. We're going to have a great time, so just stay in tune.
Kemi,
Good morning, everyone. I know you can only see my avatar. I'm super excited to be here. And when I was looking at the profile of everyone, I'm like, wow, awesome profile from everybody. Excited to learn and see what new thing I can add to my list of experience, so to speak. Thank you so much, Kenneth.
awesome. Ladi,
Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. I'm ready to go. Thank you.
beautiful. Shadrack,
Thank you
our
kindly.
veteran, yes,
Sending
yeah.
greetings from the southern tip of the African continent, from the heart of Santen, the square mile. Great to reconnect with Ladi, my former countryman, who enjoyed our wine and then left temporarily. Hopefully, we will get him back. So that is not part of the brand. Thank you.
Beautiful. And we also have Ijoma on the call, Ijoma Kandu. You remember her from one of our
Yes.
sessions in the past. She can't speak right now, but we're glad to have all. So, like I said, let us know where you're joining in from and do share this with others who could be interested. We're going to dive right into it. I mean, these days, everybody has so many calls that we can't keep you here for too long. So, we're going to dive right into the heart of the matter that we're discussing today. We're going to start from Kemi's views on the effects of unemployment in African societies. Recently, we saw similar things, how youths have been engaged, so to speak, in Nigeria in the NSAS protest, engaged both negatively and positively, engaged in South Africa during the outbursts, that had happened recently. Now, let us know what are the effects to people and generally of unemployment in African societies. Are there examples of these? And what can the private sector do to tackle this problem? Kemi, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you very much, Kenneth. When I saw this question, I just started thinking of how to write a story, how to write books about the youth unemployment in Africa. And it's quite robust, a question, I would say. So, first of all, youth unemployment has been described as a time bomb waiting to, to be unleashed, so to speak, especially because the youth make up over 60% of all Africa's current unemployed bucket. That's across all countries in Africa. I'm someone who likes statistics, which points to where we're heading and where we've started from. In 2019, our unemployment rate rose to about 11.58%. Unemployment rates in Africa currently about 10.64% and are the lowest in the past 20 years. So, to your question, what are the effects of unemployment? I'm sure most of us already know this. These are things that we know, but it's good to sort of articulate them properly again so that we're heading towards the same direction of recommendations, right? You have increased crime rates. This is evident in Nigeria, in South Africa, in East Africa, where you have the likes of robberies, home invasions, and when people are paraded, you see that a handful of persons are the youth. Low quality of life, the impact of unemployment, healthcare, it affects education, it basically just impacts the richness of life, as it were. You're talking to 22, 25-year-old young, male or female, and the things they're talking about is, I'm being stifled, I can't do this, I can't invest in a business. When I want to invest in a business, there are too many bureaucracies put in place for me to thrive. The standard of living is below average, and this also points to quality of life. So you want to eat a decent meal, and you're thinking of how to do that, because at the end of the day, it's impacted from the lack of employment. I can't get a job after leaving school, and what it means ultimately is I cannot meet up to my immediate requirements as a family person, or even the youngest in the family. Low purchasing power. If you don't have money, you can't buy what you want. And that ultimately connects to increased crime rates, as we've seen in the news every day, in the dailies every day. You're listening to persons who go into drugs, who go into selling of drugs in schools, who are going into selling of ammunition and all whatnot. Another one that we're all very familiar with is security. It has an impact on our security, as is evident with insurgency, um, terrorist attacks. You have fraud, cybercrime now, where we call them the Yahoo boys here, 419, the likes of the hush puppies. We're hearing all of that all over the news and involvement. And of course, the largest one, the largest effect of unemployment really is the increased drain on our potential workforce, um, which is mass migration to other countries, be it Europe, Canada, and it's a daily occurrence. So you have people, and it's not just unique to one country. The panelists here represent different countries within Africa, and I'm sure you can identify with most of the things I've mentioned.
Yeah.
So the questions basically around what the private sector can do, I saw that and I'm like, okay, private sector responsibility. Beyond saying build up more entrepreneurs, how do we build up more entrepreneurs? How do we ensure that people are not just focused on the 9 to 5 careers, which is good, but there are other options, entrepreneurs, there's agro entrepreneurship, um, and those are ways that the private sector can provide opportunities by providing grants. You know, you find a lot of people saying that most of their problems is even getting loans from banks to invest in businesses. So private sectors have a role in providing grants. A lot of that is evident with the likes of Tony Elumelu Foundation. I know Dangote has something similar. In East Africa, um, the former musician, I think is what's his name? I remember Akon has foundations in technology and all of that. Those are things that the private sector can focus on in expanding the opportunities for the youth. Facilitate trainings and skills acquisition. This we cannot have too much of. Even this session, for example, is one of such opportunities where, excuse me, people are listening to the statistics, listening from people who have who are experiencing this and how to separate themselves from these issues, right? The digital economy is another aspect now, which is booming. You know, you have online work, technological skills and tools, and you know, Kenneth, you know that I'm someone who is very interested in technology, and I've seen that that is one area where people are being empowered. People are looking at opportunities. People are getting knowledge in those areas. Some of the other recommendations is a handshake between government and the private sector. You know, Africa needs to discontinue from playing the basic role of consumer of global research output. We do that a lot. We're just reading up research, and then we need to be deliberate and shift to innovatively generating research to meet our own needs. What are the specific things that will fix us as a continent? Not necessarily what has worked in Europe, what has worked in South America, but building specific fixes for Africa. Our continent is very diverse in culture, in ethnicity, in religion, and all of that. So building specific research for our youth. I've mentioned education and training. This cannot be overemphasized. We have to go back to our schools. I know Ladi is going to touch on employability and all of that, but a lot of our problems also for some of us that hire people is we say people are not employable. Why are they not employable? What kind of skills what kind of skills are they picking up from schools? 30 years ago, the courses that were taught in the universities, they're shifting. What the average employer is looking for, you'll be talking about 2021 skills, digital skills. We're talking about the future of work. Are we actually equipping people in schools to be employable? The government also needs to start thinking of employment subsidies. You know, I mentioned grants and all of that, where you want to invest in your business, you want to start something. Myself and my family went somewhere yesterday. This man that used to, he works with marble for, you know, marble tombstones, for example. He's been in business more than 40 years. And I'm looking at the quality and the size of his business. It hasn't grown beyond what it was 30 years ago, right? Government also needs to improve labor market flexibility across different African countries. If you leave me, I'm going to talk till tomorrow. So
I know,
I'm going to talk till tomorrow. But I think that just
captures it.
on most of the areas that we're going to speak about. These are some of the effects of unemployment. I think I'll just leave the next person to take over. Yes, thank you very much.
Beautiful, thank you. Our selection for these sessions is very, very deliberate. I know that you have a lot in you to say, so that's one of the reasons why you're here. So let's move over to Shadrack. Thank you very much, Kemi. Thank you. Let's move on to Shadrack. Shadrack is an employer. He is the co-founder of Coronet blockchain. My apologies. He's the co-founder of Coronet blockchain, and I want to ask, from an employer point of view, do you think our youths are worth employing? Just, you know, leveraging on what Kemi has said. Please share.
Thank you kindly. Thank you kindly. And once again, we send our greetings and appreciation To our viewers around the world, thanks for sitting in. Thanks for joining us. As we can see, you are in the company of greatness. The tallest of thought leaders in Africa are in the room. You know, from an employer perspective, the issue of employability and if there are any gaps in there is a very critical one. But what I want to put out there is that my fellow Africans, also known as those that are in search for work, they have fallen victim at times of a mindset of leaving everything to the last minute. What do I mean by that? Whilst you are in school, whilst you are in school, that's where your employability priorities must take center stage for you. You know, the reason I say youth is that we can address youth, but for the purpose of this, whoever is tuning in and they're a job seeker or they're in search for their first job or a better job, I'm addressing that person to say, maybe you want to reach out to Coronet blockchain, maybe you want to reach out to our other subsidiary company. I'm saying, don't leave it to the last minute. Start early to have or cultivate what's called a volunteer spirit. Start early to cultivate internship positioning. Internship is not for school leavers only. Internship, maybe one person could be in one industry, maybe in banking, and they could be going into blockchain, or they could be in supply chains, they are going into agriculture. That is an opportunity for you to shift your mindset and put on the hat of a student and go back to the classroom of life. I put it on purpose, classroom of life, meaning rekindle your passion for learning again in order to up your job readiness or your employability rating. It doesn't start when you end up in front of me, virtually or physically, through an interview. It starts long before you even begin a degree. Before you start your degree in one industry to leap from another industry, or as your first job, you need to do your degree parallel to you becoming familiar face or to you beginning job shadowing, job internships, job volunteering. I mean, two of my colleagues here are from the YouthUp Global Ecosystems, which is known for ensuring that the youth get to plug into learning and plug into ecosystems where their mindset can become, can increase awareness. So in summary, don't leave your employability or your job readiness to the moment where an employer like Shadrack, like blockchain, Coronet blockchain, any of my ExCo members call you for an interview. You need to already be sharpening your axe. You need to already be sharpening your pencil by always taking job shadowing opportunities, job internships, and also any other job readiness. Because peer-to-peer learning is not for experts only, like the thought leaders in my list. Peer-to-peer learning is for everyone. It's for the youthful job seeker as well. So that's the first point. The second, but not least point, is that, good people, African employability is no longer an African problem, and no longer should it be measured on African metrics. If you are a youth and you are looking for a job today, I've got news for you. You know, this thing called COVID and hyper digitization and what do you call it, this borderless economy means that you are competing on a global scale. You are not competing with your fellow Africans or your fellow Nigerians or your fellow South Africans or your fellow Kenyans. You are competing on a global scale now. So you have to bring your game up to the level where you can impress an employer who is funneling through global candidates. Don't use African time. Don't use African standards. You need to up your game to a global level, because a majority of jobs are now being fought for, are now being contested on a global level. Thank you, Benji.
Thank you very much for that. Don't use African time. That one caught my attention. And
Yeah.
certain African cultures that have to do with this lackadaisical attitudes to things. Don't use African levels of excellence. we are now global. Ladi, I would like you to come in here with your experience as an educationist. We've been talking about the fact that are youths employable? How do we learn? What do we learn? Please share your thoughts on in the respect of these aspects. I'm meeting you.
My screen, please, if you can help me do that.
Yes,
Is that visible?
yes, yes. It's visible now.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I can see the energy building up from the first speaker to the second speaker, who is obviously very eloquent in driving passion. You can see the passion with which he pushes his agenda. Now, for me, I take a bit more academic, kind of like Kemi said in the beginning, more systematic approach, which has to be very structured. The first thing I did here in this presentation is to first look at the data, like she said, and that's a very good place to start. What is the data on unemployment in Africa, and what is the real crisis that we face? Now, obviously, from this research I've done, which I could feel Kevin's figures were quite the same. 43% of people are basically under the age of 15, 41% of people are basically in poverty. These are all IMF and World Bank data, OECD data. One very critical point is 10 million people enter the job market every year. This is in Africa. This data is all about Africa, really. 10 million people entering the job market every year. Typically, more than 40, 60% are graduates now in today's world. The quality of the graduates is a different story. We'll talk about that. Africa, for example, is growing at about 2.5% population growth every year. And we look at that at 1.3 billion people. You're talking about 3.25 million new people being born. Now, that's very interesting because the growth of Africa is basically an opportunity, but it will also become a cost. Let's go more with the data. The opportunities are available to Africa, and that's where we actually have to look at where we really have to focus. The stock market is basically broken down. If you look at every stock market in the world, whether it's Johannesburg Stock Exchange, whether it's the DAX index in France, or whether it's the CAC index in France, the DAX index in Germany, the London Stock Exchange, they are broken down into these sectors until we begin to align ourselves to areas of comparative and competitive advantage. Africa is in big trouble. Now, let's look at the energy sector. Energy sector alone contributes about, in terms of revenues alone in a year, the market is actually worth about almost almost a trillion, as at 2017 from research. And by 2025, this energy sector is going to be about 1.2. Now, the question is why African universities are not yet doing this. We have universities, platoras all over the whole Africa. None of them is positioning fully in harnessing the opportunities that this industry provides, even though with the natural solar energy that we have, and you can see renewable energy is going to be very big in the future. We have the basic material industry, which contains these elements, acquisition, development, and processing of mining and the rest. We find out that most of the mines we have in Africa are actually mined by foreign companies. Very interesting that you have all your wealth under your feet, but you don't even know how to mine it. 50 years later, after independence, 60 years, 6 decades after independence of most African countries, we are still lacking in the ability to actually mine these things ourselves. We have the industrial goods sector, which you see examples all here, selling machineries, equipment. I don't think Africa is very strong on that yet. We're looking at consumer discretionary goods, the kind of goods that we consume. And like Kemi rightly said, consumption becomes the focus of how we can turn things around. Let me keep going. Consumer staple goods are the ones that you can't do without. This is where agriculture fits in. And I was very particular about agriculture being arable land and aqua. A good example will be Nigeria, which imports over $750 million. Sorry, am I saying $million? $750 million of fish, frozen fish in a year. Importing like $1.6 billion worth of, just Nigeria alone, of sugar, raw sugar. Importing $4 billion of textiles. Importing $1.6 billion of cereal made from maize, made from other ingredients that we can make locally. So we come here saying we are poor. I wonder how poor we can be, really. We go into healthcare issues. We're not very competitive. Why I highlighted these two particularly are the two areas where Africa seems to focus on. Africans seem to focus more on building the service industry in terms of serving the system, but that is something that we can do without. And with new technology now, we are going to be in big trouble. All these professions are at risk, except for IT and possibly logistics. We are looking at that sector, real estate. Real estate is another new one, but unfortunately, most of the real estate materials are actually imported. I just wanted to give an idea of how to think. If you want to build an industry, if you want to talk about the educational system, you have to design your educational system to plug into these sectors, the ones you think you have the strongest advantage, and then make yourself the world leader in that. If I proceed on that and go to a bit more data, in terms of, because I want to be more data driven, and I think this session might be not enough for that. 1 second, sorry. So let me just go to 64%, sorry. I want to get the graphs in fully. If you get these graphs in, which I try to analyze, I drew up the data from the World Bank and from Strata. And this data, if you look at it carefully, this is the pattern of what Africa is looking at. In 1920, the change in GDP, the gross domestic product of Africa generally by country, indicates very clearly that the GDP in Africa is actually dropping. If you look at it carefully, this line, the blue line, is the change in GDP in 2019 and the change in GDP of unemployment. So I try to match unemployment and GDP. Unfortunately, you see very here, the blue line. The blue line shows that GDP is kind of, all of them are mostly negative. You see them below the line, this is zero. They're all almost negative. Negative figures GDP difference in terms of growth. But if you look at the unemployment figure, which is this one, you can see a significant higher figure. So you have your GDP, your revenue basically dropping, and you have your unemployment increasing. Very interesting. When you go down, that's just from the World Bank, because I took two different data sets, the World Bank data set, and I took Strata, and Strata is a bit more up to date. They seem to be having more up to date data than that. So I took two different dimensions. You see the same pattern here, that the GDP is quite lower across the board, and the unemployment, except for countries like Tanzania, for example, and you can remember there was Magufuli. It's not surprising. Magufuli was very instrumental in ensuring that happened. Stop the imports and try to create jobs locally. So you see, unemployment in Tanzania particularly was quite low in terms of role in that period of time. Mauritius, but when you look at Seychelles, not a very big country, but generally the unemployment rose significantly. You look at countries like South Africa. I don't know what Shadrack will say about this, but generally South Africa here seems to have a lower GDP and a bit of more unemployment figures. We look at countries like Namibia and we go across to things like Nigeria. So generally the data is indicating a lot of unemployment and a lot less GDP. So that's a really good sign of trouble ahead. Look at the change in GDP and the change in GDP for the 2 years. So you're looking at the change in gross domestic product per year. In 2020, it was far less, lower, the blue lines at 2020. 2019 was higher. What is it telling us? It's telling us now that the gross domestic product for African countries on the whole is actually dwindling. So your GDP last year, the red one, was actually slightly higher than the ones we are getting in 2020. Some might say it's COVID, but we'll see how long that sustains. Now, obviously, this is a series of unemployment. Obviously, the blue lines is unemployment, the latest one, seems to be a little bit higher, obviously, because of the range of percentage here. You might not see the effect very well, but you see that the blue line tends to be slightly higher on all the times, just confirms the data. Let's move a bit more towards more relevant data that draws attention to concerns. If we look at Africa, analyzed into regions, which I already did here, and I presented them in this format. So if you look at Africa presented in regions in terms of unemployment, this just validates the data that we looked at just now by regions. So the nation looks at it and you see that here, the per capita income, the income per person on average in Africa, are all negative. The percentage change, they all are negative as of 2019-20. So people are basically getting less income per person. You look at the elements of what? Unemployment by region, World Bank data. Just I just showed you now, unemployment is all positive across all regions. Slowest in Southern African region, but generally highest around the East African region, unemployment. Except, for one country like Tanzania, and most of them actually having higher unemployment using World Bank data. But when you look at the opposite data, looking from Strata, the latest data, it looks like actually East Africa has a lower level of unemployment compared to the rest of Africa. I'm not surprised. When you look at the stories of Rwanda, you look at the stories of Uganda, you look at Kenya, you look at those Eastern Bloc, they seem to be the future that seems to be taking over South African region. I'm just using data here. So I played around with the data, and I saw that overall, the GDP is not looking very good. The unemployment is not looking very good. Then we have this serious problem, which is what I tried to talk about, China. I'm not against China, but I've noticed a pattern that as the unemployment is increasing, the share of the Chinese market in Africa actually is increasing. So the production that should be happening in Africa seems to be going actually to China. We seem to be, like Kemi correctly said, consumers. And China, by giving loans to Africa, has seemingly moved in nicely to give us loans. I'm not against China, I repeat that again, please. I'm just emphasizing data of unemployment. So I come to this data set here. In this data set, I try to look at just the tomato paste industry as a very good example. Here's the consumption data on tomatoes in Africa. The green lines here all indicate what? The biggest imports of tomato paste in Africa, which is a market of the market of tomato paste is $454 million. Tomatoes that Africa does not even produce, and we say we are unemployed. The green lines here show very strongly that China is the biggest importer of tomatoes into Africa. And then we have Italy. You look at the consumers. West Africa seems to be the biggest consumer of tomatoes. Very arable lands, very good land. Unfortunately, $456 million is lost just by importing tomatoes that could create quite a lot of jobs. What do I mean by that? China controls about 45% of their foreign income comes from tomatoes to Africa. The external income is just exporting tomatoes to Africa. 45% of their external income actually comes from Africa. Italy makes about 16% of their income, foreign income, from tomato paste being sold to Africa. Together, China and India control about 95%. My question is why the universities of college and agriculture and technology and all these universities are not investing in producing even just tomato as a good example. I don't want to look at all this data in detail, but here's the summary of it. The biggest importers of tomato, just tomato paste. Nigeria, Ghana, mostly West Africa, like I saw in the data. But going right again, is another set of data that's quite interesting. Here's the tomato industry data. The biggest people that use tomato in the world import tomato. America is the biggest ones, about 30% import, Germany. So you see that Europe generally imports tomato paste. This is the market. The size of the market, just looking at the top 100 companies that import tomatoes. So a few African countries are among them. But let's look at the market of the market. This is about $10 billion of tomato paste. So if you produce tomato, Africa contributes about 456 million to it, about 4.75%. So if Africa can produce this, the question is, how many jobs can you create with this tomato replacement? Replacing your imports. Let's look at the data. 365 days in a year. The minimum rate of $1.90 is the poverty rate, according to the World Bank, poverty rate. If you multiply these two together, it means that if you can pay someone $694 in a year, they would actually cross the poverty rate. That means you can take one person out of poverty. Follow the data. If you take this data of the number of imports we have in Africa right now, and you divide it by this amount, $494, you will be able to produce, on average, at the minimum poverty rate, you're taking out about 657,000 people out of poverty just by replacing tomatoes. Very strange. When you look at the world market and you say, what if you become so good at providing just tomato and tomato paste to the world? Quality. And that also talks about industrialization. Forget about agriculture, there's also industrialization that goes with it. You move to the next stage, agricultural revolution and then industrialization. If you look at the world market and you take just 20% of the world market and say, Africa is so good at tomato production, it becomes the best in the world in production of tomato cheap, and they pay the minimum wage that gives them out of poverty, and you convert that to 20% of the total global market, excluding African market, it means by 694, you can create 2.6 million jobs. Put them together, what you're really saying is that you can create another 2.2 billion new income from just tomatoes and create about 3.3 million jobs, which increase about 0.47% to the employment rate. Now, that's basically putting out some countries which are actually causing you the poverty that you have. Now, I'm looking for one set of data, very important one. Let me just finish up here before I go into the other issues. Now, if we go down here, you will see the countries. These are the countries that have the highest rate of unemployment. I looked at the youth unemployment rates, and I looked at the imports from China. I tried to compare the two of them. We look at countries that have the highest number of Chinese imports. And I kept saying, I'm not against China, but I'm simply saying, if you look at what China is representing in the market of Africa right now, I'll just give you a data set here. Sorry, I think that's at the top here. 1 second, so I have all the sheets on here. So there's a data set that's up here. I need to find it quickly to save time. If you look at this data set, this is tomato paste. There's one set of data I'm missing, sorry. Let me quickly narrow my screen. There's one set of data I need to show. It's not coming up. Here, sorry, this data set, this one. This one here. So this data set is the unemployment rate right now in Africa. And like Kemi correctly said, generally, you should work from her data. I work from the data and looked at the 60% of people are between the age of 15 and 40. That's an average estimate of people. The highest unemployment right now in the world is Nigeria. The rate of unemployment. South Africa is the second largest one. Angola, Lesotho. So these are the number 1 in the world, number 3 in the world, number 4 in the world, number 8 in the world. Put them all together and you get a total data of close to about 14.54%, which is very similar to what Kemi was talking about. That's about 111 million people. On average, that's the rate they tell you of the unemployment rate. But the problem I found was 2.1% increase in unemployment between these 2 years, 2019 and 20, is almost exactly equal to the figure of the population growth. What does that tell us? It tells us almost immediately that all the people that are being born are automatically unemployed. That's almost a stark reality. The increase in unemployment rate, and then you tie that up to the question of the youth unemployment, which is a bigger problem. The number one youth unemployment in the world, South Africa, 63.3%. Number two in the world, Angola, 56% youth unemployment. Number three in the world, Nigeria. Number four in the world was Kosovo. Number five is Namibia. When we look at all these top countries in the world, and we look at them carefully, the top 8 countries, and we now look at all the ones that had Chinese interests. China is number one here in terms of import. China is number one, 2019, 2020. China is number one, 2019, 2020. China is number one, 2019, 2020. China is number 4 and 3 here, and they actually reduced their imports. But that population is not very big. The population of that country is just not very huge. When you look at all the huge populations in Africa, the ones in red, and you put them into data, it tells you that the highest rate of youth unemployment in Africa, 99.31% of the highest top 8 countries, removing these 2 that had a reduction, that had the lower population, 99% of them actually are the countries with China being number 1 import. What does that tell you? It tells you a very clear story, which is the last part I'm coming to. It tells you very clearly that the number of imports from China is the problem for Africa. This is China number 3, number 2, became number 3, became number 2 now, number 3. And then there's a very interesting country called Djibouti. Djibouti is here. Djibouti is a very interesting one, and how to do that data separately. Djibouti has an increase of China's import of 32.8%, and China's import has now jumped to 43.3% in Djibouti, about 32% increase. Let's look at Djibouti as a very small country in the Horn of Africa and try to understand what the problem really is and how our educational system has to be designed to ensure that our people, like Kemi said, are entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurship should be taught in the system. Now, there's a very funny story. Here's the country's imports, 5.1 billion imports. The export was only 134 million, selling sheep and goat skin, That's 38 times the multiples. If you multiply this, divide them, 5.1 billion import, and only 134 million export. What does that tell me? 38%, 38 times. That's 3,800%. And this comes to the story of ACFA. This ACFA simply means that it seems like the Chinese are using this country to bring in the products into Africa and to distribute it. That raises a question about the loans on building tracks and trains and all this stuff. I don't know if those trains and track lines will serve the Africans, but actually serve to actually expand Chinese business in Africa. To summarize what I'm saying, really, what I'm simply saying is that, first of all, in terms of brain drain, our African graduates are not really bad. The only problem with African graduates is they work better when they're overseas. The African graduate will work 4 times, 5 times more difficult work overseas than when they're actually in Africa. We have to address that point as to why that is happening. Secondly, there's really no brain drain. I don't think there's a brain drain, really. I think to a large extent, it's a learning curve. Africans have to go overseas and see how things are done in one generation and maybe come back. This has happened in Israel when they were in Egypt. It's happened in China. China has sent a lot of people overseas to learn and came back. Not South Korea. Dubai is doing that right now. A lot of that is happening in Dubai. Saudi Arabia, Libya under Gaddafi used to send people overseas to learn and come back. India has done that. Britain and Europe generally in the mid-17th century and the 19th century, they went overseas to learn agriculture and bring in, this is where the slave trade came in anyway, the agricultural revolution. The problem really in African education and training is basically when leadership fails, the citizens then need to do what? They need to lead themselves. And this is where you talk about brain drain. People start to lead themselves when there's no leadership, and you can't blame them. If they get more money in dollars, pounds, dirhams, United Emirates, dirhams, and dollars and yens, they will go overseas. And that's why the educational system is supposed to be designed, as it's done in the West, to ensure that you don't just teach knowledge. You actually teach people to be intelligent. Intelligent means the ability to apply the knowledge. So that's what we are finding right now. So this is where I'm going to end up my own point and really raise the question that the educational system has to train people not just to be knowledgeable, but actually to be intelligent. So therefore, the guy who is building tomato should see the benefit of talking to the guy who builds industrial machines. The engineers should see the possibility of converting tomatoes into tomato paste and sell it to the world. This is that ecosystem that's lacking. It comes with leadership. It comes like my colleague also said earlier that you have to have personal drive to want to see a different perspective. Your learning should not be based on only what they teach you, but you actually go out and explore. You might find out that you're a pharmacist and you become the best person who does farming, because through your knowledge of pharmacy and medicine and maybe herbal medicine, you actually become the best agriculturist. And Africa needs to have billionaires who are actually agriculturists, not bankers, because the bankers are the ones sponsoring the imports and killing the local jobs. That's where I'll end my point for now. I think I've taken a bit too much time. Sorry about that.
That is absolutely classic. That is classic. And when data talks, there's no argument. And sometimes when I see these kinds of things, I ask a number of questions. The first question is, what did our ancestors do? I mean, for those, that was a joke. But the second question is this data visible to leadership? And is it an issue of, they used to say in Nigeria back then with respect to power, that some cabal is more interested in importing generators than in fixing power. I mean, is it that the data is available but ignored for private purposes? I mean, that's
Yes,
another question.
that's
Wow.
correct.
Then the third question is something Ladi said during when he was speaking about countries with strategic intent of going to learn and returning. I think our part of our problem is the returning parts that is not so evident. Am I correct, Ladi? The returning part, eh, we need to look at it more, or the strategic intent of the leaving. Because as you're saying, people are leaving because they are leading themselves to better life for themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's leading themselves. So there's no real long-term plan to say, okay, what we really want to do is to, and I think that's one of the intents of this session. If we can lead ourselves to make better lives for ourselves, is there anything we can do that while we are making our lives better for ourselves, we look for a way to create something sustainable in our environment, because our future is at stake, as apparently our future is at stake. So let me open the floor a bit more and get a few responses in a few minutes from some of the other panelists. I don't know whether anyone has any feedback on these thoughts from Ladi, Yvonne, Kemi, Gathoni.
So
Yvonne.
yeah, I completely agree with Ladi on the issue of the fact that we are being thought to be knowledgeable and not intelligent in Africa. I'm sure I'll have my turn to share my experience, but
Yeah.
going to school out there, it was all practical, implementing what you study. Every session, you are applying to the real life scenarios to see what works, what doesn't work, what needs to change, and what has to be implemented. So it's very true. It has to do with our education system, which I completely agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Yvonne, for that. Our educational system, powerful. All right, we're going to move a little bit ahead. Before that, I'd like us to take a breather because I think we have consumed a lot. So we're going to just take 30 seconds and watch this short video and then come back and move to the other questions in this session. So just breathe in, breathe out, maybe pray for your ancestors and for ourselves and for whatever it is. All right, we'll be back in a minute or so. Okay, thank you for being there. And if you reflect, I think this lesson here, I think, I mean, we need to keep there and ask ourselves, which direction do we want to continue to go? We can just hands up and keep blaming the government, but I think more voices need to be stronger in saying, what can we do to change the narrative around these areas? And thank you so much, Ladi, for giving us those insightful bits of data. Um, all right, so I want to just call on Shadrack to again speak to this and respond to what we've seen in this last few minutes.
Thank you kindly. Just a brief note of appreciation for the outline that Ladi has put. I think it's more like a writing on the wall. And you're quite right, Kenneth. When numbers speak, then everything else become immaterial because the data, when visualized, can become prophetic and can inform the critical leadership decisions that can change narrative and change the trajectory. So I just wanted to appreciate my brother Ladi. And in this environment, it's interesting that when Africans are out there and they are supervised by other nations, they have an output of 5 times more productivity than when they're on African soil. That was a shocking writing on the wall. And it's also quite interesting that Ladi has made that connection between China's priorities within Africa or embedding, if I can use that word very cautiously, and also the tendency for those governments where China is becoming more embedded to almost be on a back footing in terms of the employment patterns and also the productivity priorities. You know, he touched on tomatoes, and it's interesting because at one point, Ghana used to be Africa's go-to in terms of tomatoes or red gold. Of course, other countries are producing tomatoes, including the former Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, but Ghana used to particularly be sterling when it comes to the mastery of red gold. But sadly, today, Ghanaian farmers are actually going out to Italy, where they are earning a pittance instead of working on Ghanaian soil. They're going to Italy in hope of a better life, but they end up being exploited by cartels, by farming cartels in Italy. So it's a very interesting thing also to have noted Ghana's reluctance at a macro level or at a government level to fix the tomato industry, which used to really be the breadbasket of West Africa from a tomato perspective. The reluctance to industrialize by Ghana, where what do you call it, the tomato farming output is shrinking, and there is no initiative to increase the processing towards the tomato paste, is really shocking. And he also asked, what do I say about the South African side of things? Look, in South Africa, we used to be comfortable to say we are the Europe of Africa. I don't know where they got that from, but it's a very messed up way of thinking, because we are the only country in the whole continent that has got the word Africa in it. So we are more Africa than anything. So that is really bizarre. So I think we have gotten comfortable. There are 4 economies. 4. There's South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and Egypt. Those were the big 4 of leading Africa's economic trajectory. But I think those 4 economies, South Africa included, are catching a wake up right now, because we have gotten so comfortable on being the blue-eyed boy or on being the favored ones. But right now, Rwanda is stepping forward to punch beyond its weight, and other economies are coming into the fore to almost overtake South Africa and overtake Nigeria. You see, so we have to catch a wake up as countries and realize that we cannot ignore our youth when we need to create gainful employment, and we also cannot ignore insights that the likes of Ladi, the likes of Kemi are actually bringing forward, because any territory that ignores its prophets, also known as its data scientists, its educationists, its analysts, then that territory is doomed to fail. So hopefully a segment of this sitting makes its way to Abuja to inform or bring back some senses, makes its way to Pretoria, makes its way to Nairobi, so that the elders can listen to the experts that are youthful and that are helping to co-create the Africa we want. Thank you kindly. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Shadrack. That was beautiful. That was awesome. And that was so true. And now I'm going to ask Gathoni to share her thoughts in the area of the emigration. I think Ladi highlighted as well. Do you think this recent rise in emigration to several countries, is it worth it? Is it worth it for those who go? And what's the impact on the local economies? What are your thoughts
on the
on
local
that?
economy? Thank you, Kenneth. Ladi, your presentation was actually exceptional. Key things that I'm going to take home is that every African that is being born today is actually going to be in unemployment. And that's such a big wake-up call. I don't know if the leaders of today have this particular statistics, but it's such a wake-up call, especially because the statistics are that by 2068, 1 billion Africans will be below the age of 18. So if we're not getting the opportunities to sit in areas where we're making decisions, what exactly is going to happen? But let me just give my comments about the question you've just asked. I was watching a show called, it's on Netflix, and I think all of you should watch it, How to Be a tyrant. And I think it had the interesting story of the former president of Libya, Gaddafi. And as much as he was a dictator, the key things that I learned about what he did for the Libyans was he completely revolutionized how education is. He sent his people away to come back. And I think that, fine, as much as people go out and look for opportunities which are better, in the, you know, in Canada, in Europe, in the Americas, there's a lacuna left at home. There's the economy that drops when people go out and look for opportunities out there, probably get paid 5-10 times better. I can give you an example of, we advertised for 21 positions in the organization that I sit as a director on the board, and it was sad to actually see that 21 positions, we got about 25,000 job applications. So it means that everyone that is being churned out of university right now is not having an opportunity in terms of getting a job. So it's really, really sad. And the education system here at home in Kenya, or rather in East Africa, we have courses which we are requesting for the leaders in the leadership positions to just scrap off. If you talk about secretarial positions, I mean, that's going to become irrelevant in the next 10, 20, 30 years. So the education system, just like Ladi and Yvonne have communicated, needs to be completely have an overhaul. But what are we as individuals doing in our capacities? As much as it's very hard for us to have opportunities, we're probably not being invited to the spheres or the spaces where we're being given opportunities to sit down and give our facts and our findings and actually have positions of leadership. For example, I was the acting chair of KFCB for about a year. And when I went to have a meeting with the other chairpersons, there were people walking with, walking sticks. All people, when they looked at me, I actually looked like I was in the wrong room at the wrong time. So if the baton is not passed over to us as the youth, then I mean, we're completely lost and we're doing the wrong thing. But I don't think that they're actually going to sit down and let us have the opportunities. We actually have to be prepared and be ready and actually demand to be given the opportunities so that we can be able to revolutionize and change the future. So those are my comments.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Gathoni.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So the strategy of looking at the lacuna back home
Yes.
is
Yes.
very, I see everybody, no matter where you are, you have a blood relative who has to face the realities of your home country. And it is not a racist thing, it is simply an issue of responsibility. How do you help your society back where you came from to move to the level where you are? That's the question. So let me turn over to Kemi. Kemi is an HR expert, and I also like you to talk a little bit about. Sorry, my apologies. Our time is fast running, but I would like you to share your thoughts quickly about the issue of immigration for work opportunities in Africa.
Thank you, Kenneth. In fact, Ladi just blew the table off. He broke all the legs, broke all the chairs and everything. But
I'll
with
sell it to
data,
you. I'll still sell it to
yeah,
you.
thank you. With data, you can never go wrong, and it's just
Yeah.
painful to see how glaring it is. I know he kept saying, "Oh, I have nothing against this country. I have nothing against this particular country," but it's very important that we navigate what we have and match it against what we're seeing, and the data sells it all. So to your question, Kenneth, um, from my experience, and I'm speaking from someone who's involved with recruiting people, having to retain people, having to engage a workforce, and daily you're dealing with people telling you that what does the continent have to offer me? Why am I seeing potential workforce to other countries because of the quality of life, because of issues around security. And this is not just very young people. These spans across middle age, persons who are doing relatively well, if you talk about how much they earn per month. But everything put together, together, you're looking at, okay, the children that are coming into the workforce, like Ladi said, and I think that Gathoni also emphasized, was that, we're giving birth to people who automatically will be unemployed. That is a call to action. So what that means is, as employers of labor, as persons who are involved in providing employability skills, as persons who are speaking to this issue that we're facing as Africa, we need to be deliberate in the conversation. We need to show people opportunities abound. But Ladi said something that was interesting, because if you study history, this is not the first time that people are migrating, in truth. Over the years, in every, over decades, you find out that there is a migration. There is the diaspora, the diaspora, as they say, where you go to learn new skills, come back to the country, to pass on that knowledge, to equip people. But it all, it says it rises and falls with leadership. So whether it's at the political level, whether it's at even the leaders of institutions, there has to be a deliberatedness, so to speak, of ensuring that this brain drain that we sense is happening is restored. So yes, people are leaving, but are we ensuring that they're going to come back to the countries to reinvest in intellect? Are we ensuring that they're going to come back to pass on knowledge? And when we say knowledge, it's not just knowledge that was learned in the four walls of the institution. And I think Shadrack spoke on that. Where you're talking about internship, deliberate learning, skills. What are you picking on? I studied accounting in school, but I've moved on over the years. And one of my interest areas is data, like Ladi says. And that's one of the things that gives me an edge when I'm even talking about HR, you know. So what are you doing specifically in your field of study? I think it was Gathoni that mentioned even secretarial studies. Some of these things are going to be extinct if we're not careful. If anything, we've learned in 2020 when people said, oh, you can't work from home. The whole world worked from home. We were forced to work from home. So, to your question, Kenneth, I think this is something I'm experiencing daily. I get people who come and say, I'm resigning, and it's no more that you're losing people to the next company or to competition. You're actually losing potential key talent to another country, to another environment. So how do we consciously bring them back home? How do we ensure that they're invested in back in the countries? The future of work has opened that way. So I can be in Ghana, I can be in Togo, as we call it, the gig economy. I'm able to serve different businesses, right? I'm able to work across 4 or 5 companies, or even 4 or 5 roles. So that's one area intellect, or the personnel, maybe the physical person is leaving, but if those opportunities are provided, it could help. I do hope that I've answered the question. I know I've talked on different spaces, but that's my response to your question, Kenneth.
Thank you very much. So this is happening right in front of us, and the HR experts is telling us that this is happening. People are leaving, and there's no strategy, no deliberate strategy to have them either invest back where they came from or come back. I mean, but at least to be able to say, what am I doing to make sure that other people have the kind of opportunities that I've created for myself? We're going to hear the experience of Yvonne Agyeman and her roles in Canada and Ghana, and a whole story of her career in this context. Yvonne.
Okay, thank you, Kenneth, once again. And it's a great opportunity to be here with this amazing panelists. The analytics is just blowing my mind. Yeah, and it's a really great opportunity. So, I moved to Canada to study in 2015. But with a little data in the background, as of 2018, there were about 52,900 Ghanaians doing their tertiary level education abroad. And that is representing a 70% growth between 2010 and 2018 of the number of Ghanaians moving out to study. That's just studying. And then that's representing an annual rate of 8.8% growth rate. So annually it's growing by 8.8%. The numbers will grow. So I'm sure I was one of the numbers, the 52,000. And for me, it was exciting because after my bachelor's, I wanted to study in North America to get some exposure, to learn something different, know what is going out there. So it was very important for me. And it coincided with a family decision to relocate. So everything went well. My husband had a job and we all left and got to Canada. But the whole system blew my mind. As Shadrack said, no African time. Everybody is on the run. The whole program was back to back packed. And I had to juggle with my 10-month-old and then my husband working, me being in school full time. So it was quite tough. And I was looking back and saying, in Ghana, I'll find someone to take care of my son easily. But we had to work around the clock, virtually 24 hours. I go to school morning till afternoon. He goes to work in the evening. And it was fine for him because fortunately he was doing a postdoc and it was a research position, so he could adjust. Yes. But the whole experience was mind blowing from the whole education, as Ladi mentioned. Out there, and I mentioned earlier, is more practical, not about your grades, more interactive, trying to understand how you can apply what you study, not necessarily passing the grade or passing the exam. That wasn't necessary. There were times that there were courses that focused on contribution, application, 60% of your grade, and not you passing the exam. The exam was only worth 40%. So it's really an issue of our educational system back home, because back home in Ghana, you just need to pass your exam and get your grade A and have your certificate. But out there, it's not like that. I mean, I had to break out of being an introvert when I went to study outside because you need 60% to pass. And you cannot be quiet sitting in class. No, you need to speak, you need to contribute, you need to show what you know and how are you applying what you're studying, not just sitting there and waiting for exam. Yeah, aside that, I mean, the whole environment, the weather, and all of that is another issue to talk about. But I realized the reasons why people are leaving and going to say, let me speak for Canada. It's issues about most Ghanaians I met were there because of tertiary education. They came to further their education. But once they got there and how the systems were working, how the healthcare systems were amazing. Like, I remember the day I fell ill and an ambulance picked me up. It felt like a movie because I've never experienced that, but it was actually happening with me. And everything works. In like 5 minutes, they were there. Paramedics were on me. I was on a stretcher being moved to the car. And I went alone. My family had to join me on their own. Like, everything is so well structured. You are fine. You are fine. And it's so people, after experiencing that, become a little skeptical about coming home because they look back at how things are in Ghana and how things are there and they don't want to come back. Then secondly, the opportunities. There are lots of courses we are having in our universities, running in our universities that people don't even have the opportunities to work with. So a lot of Africans are working in industries that are not really what they want to do. That's not really what their interests are, but they need to find a job to earn a living. So the whole unemployment thing, even for those who are out to get a better life out there. Then it comes to the issue of remuneration. Just this week during my research, just for doctors in Ghana and doctors in Canada. So for a doctor who is like a junior doctor starting in Canada can earn up to $300,000 Canadian dollars annual salary. That is more than 10 times what a Ghanaian doctor will be earning in Ghana. So even for the professionals, the remuneration is a big factor for which they are moving out. So it's a whole standard of living, the quality of life you are getting, the quality of education, the kind of exposure people want their children to have, and looking back and seeing what it was like for them growing up in Ghana, they really don't want to come back. They want their children to be there and have the best of life. So it's a whole different experience, I must say. And it's going to take a lot of work. I mean, my husband and I, we purpose to come back when we are done for whatever we went to do. So after 2-3 years, we settled. He finished his postdoc. I also finished my school. I worked for a while, so I have the experience there. I know what it means working there. You put in your best. You put in your best. And sometimes I feel like we are not putting in our best in Africa because of remuneration. Because you look at the money you are earning and you don't want to slack. And one thing about being out there is being paid on the hourly wage. Because you know every second counts. Every single second counts. But back home, we are paid monthly. So people are sluggish, thinking that whether they work or not, they are going to earn their salaries. But out there, your hour counts. You log in, you are being monitored. You are being monitored till end of day. And then you know. I mean, there was a day I was sick. I couldn't do my 8-hour shift and I had to go home. I was paid the number of hours I was in the office. So it's that serious. And that's how come it looks like we put out our best when we are out there, because the system make you work. The systems make you conform. So it's a whole different experience out there. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much for that one. That was brilliant. That was the practical side of what we are talking about. And
Yeah.
yes, so we've run out of time. So I will just take 2 or 3 more questions, and then we'll close the session. But I want to come back to Ladi, and I want to ask a very interesting question. Now, we all know we want what is out there. We want what is out there. I want what's out there. I want a job in Germany or Austria and whatever. But now, why do they want us? Is it that we're so good, or are there some other reasons we don't know about? What do you think?
Oh, thank you for that. That was a very, very brilliant question. I think the end result is that we undervalue our own people. It's very easy to see a graduate in Nigeria who is a graduate of engineering being a cleaner in maybe London, cleaning the streets or cleaning somebody who is sick or old person, and being happy doing it for the currency that they get. Now, the problem there is Africa is filthy, but we are cleaning up Europe and America. It doesn't make any sense. You're having the most educated people cleaning streets here and being happy. So it comes down to the whole ecosystem. The only thing that can bring people back is when the vision is bigger than the reality. And that's what the story of Israel was with Moses. If I take that analogy, Moses gave a vision of a place that he's never been, but he was able to articulate the vision to say there's a better place for you. The Africans will be back in Africa in no time, so long as the infrastructure and the leadership is very clear that they are patriotic to Africa. It is one thing you don't learn in your curriculum, patriotism, but it's one thing that is present in every other developed economy. The Jews are patriotic. The Americans are patriotic. These North Koreans are patriotic. North Korea, not South. South Koreans are patriotic. The Turkish are patriotic. The South Africans, to a large extent, are patriotic until they drink some wine. You know, Shadrack, you know what I'm saying? So wine and some meat. So generally speaking, until we create a bigger vision for Africa, which is where our leaders, like Kemi rightly said, our leaders don't even know the data. All they do is sit down, sign contracts. You see contracts being signed between Chinese and Nigerian people or African leaders. They all come without a piece of paper. The Chinese are all noted. Every single minister signing a deal is noted. The Africans come and shake hands. They're looking there, no single piece of paper. They have no strategic plan. They have no idea. It's almost like our leaders, our elders have failed us. But it's good to actually travel to see a difference. And that's where we are now. We are at that stage where we are going through the renaissance. I think it's more of a youthful renaissance where youths are now waking up to say, we can do better. And I'm very happy to see online a lot of youths helping themselves across different regions, honestly. There is hope in Africa, but the difference is that the vision to bring people back would have to be better. It's not about the money, but the vision of what Yvonne just said now should be bigger. And it's so easy to bring back because they've got the skills. And now you can connect without actually being in Africa. You actually can run operations across borders. So I think we need to build a vision that tells us a place that we've never been before and be very committed to actually be patriotic They don't teach us in curriculum, but we have to teach ourselves because that's where we came from. We were patriotic to our families, we were patriotic to our community, we represented our society anywhere we went. Today is a free fall, every man for himself. So I think the vision has to be bigger, strategic, and the data should be leading us on what we should be doing. That's what China does. All these roads you see, all these trains you see, they are mapping the whole towns and they're going to pinpoint where their Chinese companies will position themselves in Africa to take over. All these roads and infrastructure is going to be used by them, not by you.
Wow. Insightful.
You pay the bill, they'll use it.
It is well. Shadrack always talks about aid versus trade, the imbalance between Africa and the rest of the world. Do you think the issue of human resources is an example of this?
Thank you kindly. Thank you so much, Kellen. In terms of aid versus trade, we have a very unique scenario of the continent. In terms of particularly our unemployed youth, somebody is keeping them on life support. Somebody is keeping them on life support. And those parties that are keeping the unemployed youth in Africa on life support, I will name just the obvious parties. One, to some extent, governments are like South Africa and other countries, they are passing on what's called social grants, meaning some form of local aid for those that are unemployed. That's number one. Number two, we also have foreign aid coming in, as you correctly pointed it. But number three, the third party worth noting is those Africans that are in diaspora. They are also keeping Africa on life support, which we are grateful. However, we need to be cautious not to be double standards. We need, as Africa, we need more trade than aid. What does the statement apply to, or who does it apply to? It applies to the humanitarian agencies that are more energetic to bring aid to Africa rather than co-creating a trade environment for jobs. That's number two. However, very interestingly, our diaspora Africans must also come to the party. Who are you sending money home to? I say diaspora. It's interesting because we've got those in Canada, we've got those in the UK, Dubai. Those are global diaspora. But we also have a local diaspora. What do I mean? Those in the major cities like Lagos, like Johannesburg, sending money to the rural communities, to those in villages. Both are diaspora. One is the local diaspora, the other one is an international diaspora. We need to hold ourselves to the same accountability standard. Let us not send money to the stomach more than we send money to the head. Meaning, let's feed our families, but let's also equip our families with skills. Africa depends on us to put X amount towards life support of daily needs, of food. That's our family. We owe them that. But we must also think of it as a family business. Feed their stomachs, but also cultivate their brains so that down the road, they're also engaging more in trade rather than asking for more aid. We must hold ourselves accountable. Thank you kindly.
Hold on.
Feed our minds more than our stomachs. I mean, we could go on and on with these thoughts, but we have to close very shortly. In about 5 minutes, we'll be closing. And there's an interesting question here from Michael Kofi. He says, I find a lot of the solutions preferred to be quite long-term or vague. What are 3 action points that can be done today to start a solution to these problems? So I think we're going to close with that question. Each of us maybe we'll just air our thoughts on that. Maybe 1 to 3 action points that can be started today. But before we answer that, I would like to go over to Gathoni to tell us what YouthUp Global is doing about employment or unemployment in I believe that's Nigeria. Yes. In Nigeria.
Yes, in Nigeria. Thank you, Kenneth. So with Nigeria being the launch country for the Innovate Africa project, which is centered around addressing youth unemployment, YouthUp Global movements has already secured various partnerships with innovative, driven brands to create empowerment programs and opportunities. Examples of these partnerships are with Simplifex, which is one, a logistics startup in Nigeria. Recently, is set to provide in 2 years over 10,000 youths an opportunity to work remotely as partner agents to the startup after an economic empowerment internship. We also have onboarded various other startups under the Startup Apprenticeship Community, a community who are offering internship and full employment opportunities to our African community. The Startup Apprenticeship Community is a collaborative program between YouthUp Global and other brands and individuals under the Innovate Africa project. Also, another recent collaboration between YouthUp and EBOC, an e-commerce aggregator with markets in America, Europe, and Asia, is set to provide opportunity to especially artisans and traders in the informal sector to get trained in the modern technology and branding to be able to package and sell to international markets within a BOC coverage. This program has the capacity to empower over 50,000 youths in the informal sector, bringing them to the mainstream. We are also collaborating with Tekidia Institute to empower our community through the right education, challenging them to become innovative in their approach, whether in employment, career, or as an entrepreneur. We are also working with Fillmore Integrated Services, an entertainment startup that is leveraging on technology to create entrepreneurship empowerment programs for our African community starting from Nigeria. This
Wow.
program supports the African creative industry with the entertainment space. And lastly, we're working with Joberman, Nigeria, to retrain and coach our people on career development and prospecting strategies, especially training on soft skills, because there's also the problem of unemployability of most graduates due to lack of these skills. So that's basically what we're doing at Youth at Global.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. That was a long one, but I think
Yes, it
from
was a
that,
long one. I wanted to
essentially,
capture all the partnerships, yes.
all right, great. So
Yes.
essentially, creating the opportunities through training and through partnerships that focus on apprenticeships, right? With
Yes.
apprenticeships for young startups and so forth. That's incredible. That's interesting. I think that's something that is starting now. So if you're in
Yes.
the external audience and you know things like this going on, you can let us know about it in the comments. I mean, share with us. Maybe we'll just display it as well before we close. And we're going to close with this. We're going to close with each of us giving us our thoughts on that last question. What 1 to 3 points we can do now to respond to the problems we have highlighted? Let me start from Kemi.
Okay, I saw his question and I loved the question. First of all, the issue of unemployability cannot be resolved overnight, right?
Yeah.
And requires collective efforts from all stakeholders and competitiveness of SMEs to leverage employment, which is one of the things we're doing. And I think Gathoni also mentioned. I'll share one point I'm pitching to. For me, it will be that we need to increase investment in R&D infrastructure, which of course will thereby strengthen our natural system of innovation. This cannot be overemphasized. So we need to increase the investment. Government, private sector needs to increase investment. Schools, universities in R&D infrastructure, thereby strengthening our natural system of innovation. That would be one of my points for Michael. These are things we should be able to do immediately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kemi. Thank you very much for that. Increased investment in innovation in R&D. Yvonne, you have thoughts on that for us?
For me, with all Ladi's stats, it's agriculture for me. So
Wow.
I'm thinking universities, tertiary institutions that have the agro department can consider making it more practical, giving students projects to have farms. Government should provide some land so they have farms and see how well they will do in growing the crops, seeing how much returns they can get selling crops so that they are motivated into go into farming. Because if just tomatoes is costing us this much in Africa, then there's so much we can do with all our other resources. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Agriculture is a focal point. Let me come over to Shadrack. What can we do now?
Thank you kindly. I'm going to put on the hat of strategy that I also wear in my daily, what do you call it, in my daily endeavors in order to help just one person on the continent of Africa, just one person to respond to the question, what steps can be taken immediately? I want to put the context that I'm addressing only one person. If I can only help one person in my response, I might have made Africa great again. Who is that person? Dear job seeker, whether you are in Lagos, whether you are in Johannesburg, whether you're in Nairobi or Accra, I want to speak to you in order to be practical to respond to the question at hand. What can be done immediately in the short term, in the midterm? I want to respond to the question by asking a question. Think about it. Even though the unemployment of Nigeria is swelling, even though the unemployment rate of South Africa is following closely behind, here's the reality. In July, last month, there are a certain number of people that were employed in Lagos, in Accra, in Johannesburg, in Nairobi. The question that I want to ask you before I give you some insights, why not you? Why was it not you that was employed? I'm not asking that to blame you. I'm saying, is there room after this truth interview for you to have a man in the mirror moment or a woman in the mirror moment in order to fulfill the question that was asked? What can be done immediately? Question number one, is your job readiness where it should be? Are your interviewing skills where they should be? Are you on LinkedIn? I mean, this is LinkedIn Live. Are you connecting with the people that you ought to be connecting to? And the ecosystems where you are listening in, are those the right ecosystems? Why did your name not come up when just a small amount of Africans were employed? Well, don't blame yourself. Don't punch yourself. August is here. September is coming. What can you do now to up your interviewing skills, to up your job skills, to up your CV positioning, and the brand called you? Because unemployment is a macro problem or a national crisis, but also a personal crisis. You in the immediate may not touch where Nigeria is going. You may not touch the economic forces, but you can actually focus on what you can change. Because when you do that, then maybe you will show up on the HR grid where they call you for the interview. So yes, the national crisis must be solved. The continental problems must be solved. But the brand called you needs to put food on the table. And to do that, you need to take your eyes off the national crisis and look at it as a personal crisis and move the furniture that must be moved now in order to put yourself on that HR agenda. Thank you kindly.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. I mean, bring the question back home to ourselves. How can we become better? So let me give the floor again to Gathoni. Gathoni, what do we do now? What can we do immediately?
First and foremost, I really appreciate what Shadrack said. So once you just separate yourself, I think we have a generation that some of us can be almost entitled. So we're a different generation from our parents. We expect things quickly, things should be done the way we want them. But I think COVID-19 and the coronavirus has shown us that we should be able to work wherever we are. And personally, for me, I decided to look at myself. I'll give an example of myself. As Shadrack has said, do you have the readiness? How, are you going for the training opportunities? For example, at YouthUp Global, I decided that I wanted to be one of the people that sit on the table. The other hat that I wear is the regional director of East Africa. And how I showed initiative is that I reached out to our president, Faith Nyobia, and I was like, what opportunities are there? What can I do? How can I help? So sometimes you just need to perfect your skills, actually show the interest and be actually able to do what is required of you. Once you show initiative, once you show people that you're ready, once you perfect your skills, I'm also a wholeness coach. It's something that I'm passionate about. My personal story is that I lost 40 kilograms in 4 years. And I decided that it's not about other people, it's about what am I going to do for myself. So now I want to help women across the world. And I was like, if I want to get to every woman, she can just click me from the top of from the button and she can be able to interact with me. I was like, I need to perfect my skills. So I'm going through a coaching session, and my coach is someone in Atlanta City. So if I sat down and I felt sorry for myself and I said there are no opportunities, I think there are so many opportunities that you can just reinvent yourself and make yourself a brand. So just like Shadrack said, look within yourself, perfect your skills, show initiative. Even if you're not being paid, just get yourself on the roster, be willing and open to work. The opportunities will always come. The opportunities will always come. And once you change your mind shift, so many other doors are going to open. So that's my take.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Get involved. Get involved with working organizations that can help you. Thank you so much, Ladi. Definitely not the least. Please,
Thanks.
what can we do now?
Yeah, for me, I think I take the four perspectives into one. I think we need to focus on what we are better at and what we have the opportunity and advantage at agribusiness, not just arable, but like Kemi also said, research. We need to become one of the best. Every company that listed in the world looks for the best for cheapest. Good example, Brazil. Brazil went through the history of sugarcane problem, because Brazil is now creating ethanol and fuel, global fuel. They're very good at that. They've turned agriculture into a massive, massive empire, and that's why Brazil is fueling itself well. So we need to go back to what we are good at, using research, like Kemi said, Yvonne's position about agribusiness, pull it together, the personality, the individuality, which is more about the drive, the passion, the commitment, and a zeal to become world-class standard in something. But then we also need the overall strategy from the public. And I think for now, the most important thing is backward integration. Produce what you need. Only purchase what you don't need. That will keep your currency strong. That will keep your foreign reserves good. That will reduce the amount of poverty you have in the place. And that will bring in foreign direct investment. If you do not reverse that and you allow people to enter into your space while you are leaving your space, you will never come out of that cycle. So we need to reverse that situation where we first of all identify through research, like Kemi said, everything that we actually can make ourselves. That is being patriotic. That's not being funny. Every other country is patriotic to themselves. If Africans can answer the name Africa, if they ask you where you're from, don't say you're from Kenya. Brand yourself as an African. When we have 1.3 million, 2 point something billion people around the world calling themselves African first before nationality, I think we'll start to tell the story. Everybody starts to lift up the next person and do the right things. That's where I think. But for now, backward integration. Make sure that you can produce what you need immediately. Stop that importation. Stop it.
Wow. Stop the importation. Stop wearing suits. Stop wearing
It's
suits
just
to
being
work.
patriotic. It's just, you don't have to apologize to anyone. Nobody gives you loan on the condition that you must import from them. And this is where China is moving in, because the West used to give us loans in Africa, and then we used to import from the West. But now we see the Chinese trucks, we see everything. So you need to stop that. Take the loans, but use it to build yourself. Don't give the money back to them.
That is powerful.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, sorry, stop wearing shoes was a joke, but I mean, it just speaks to the issue. Use what you have and be patriotic to yourself. Thank you very much, Ladi, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Produce what you can, purchase only what you need. We've learned a lot today, and there's not even enough time to break it all down. But we started with our analysis of the impact of unemployment, with a lot of data telling us where we are as a people. It's almost tear inspiring, if you wish. I mean, it's so emotional where we are, and thinking to ourselves, what do we do now? What can we do without the government? What do we need the government to do for us? And it's been an insightful session. The conversation continues. Thank you, Michael, for that response. The conversation continues. Do the charts. Think about how you can contribute. Engage with organizations that are doing something about employment. And I think we can make something happen wherever we are. I'd like to once again thank my panelists, Ladi, Yvonne, and definitely I thank you, Gemma, for joining us today. Thank you, Kemi. Thank you, Shadrack. and Gathoni. I'm just going to end the broadcast now, and then we'll be by ourselves internally. Thank you, everyone who joined us from outside,
Thank you.
whether it's LinkedIn or whether it is YouTube or Facebook.